If your current life makes you breathless, you're not weak. Your nervous system is revolting against the fake. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure. A fatigue that lives in your bones, not your muscles. You wake up tired. You go through the motions. And somewhere underneath all the productivity, all the achievement, all the carefully maintained appearances, something is screaming for you to stop. Most people call this burnout. Some call it depression. A few call it a midlife crisis. But what if I told you it's none of those things? What if this collapse, this inner disintegration you're experiencing, is not a malfunction, but a metamorphosis? The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. These words, simple as they sound, contain a radical truth. The life that works for everyone around you might be suffocating you. And when that happens, your psyche doesn't send you a polite memo. It wages a revolution. This is what Carl Jung calls individuation, the process by which you stop being who you were told to be and start becoming who you actually are. It's messy, it's painful, and it looks nothing like the neat transformation stories you've been sold. What you're about to discover are the 7 signs that your soul is going through this ancient alchemy. Not tips for patching up your persona and getting back to normal. Not strategies for becoming a better version of your current self. This is about something far more fundamental, the dismantling of a borrowed life and the emergence of your actual one. These aren't symptoms to fix. They're signals from the deepest part of you, what Carl Jung called the self telling you that the operating system you've been running on has become obsolete. And when an operating system becomes obsolete, it doesn't upgrade. It crashes completely. So it can reboot from the ground up. Inner collapse is not failure. It is the boot sequence of individuation. Over the next 50 minutes, we're going to walk through the 7 unmistakable signs that this process has begun in you. We'll explore why your body suddenly can't tolerate what it once endured, why shadows from your past are rising without permission, why you crave solitude like oxygen, why achievements that once meant everything now feel like fossilized metals from a war you no longer believe in. We're going to talk about what happens when intuition sharpens, even as everything else blurs. When relationships fall away, not because you're cold, but because your frequency is changing. And finally, when small sparks appear in the rubble, not the fireworks of rebirth you expected, but something quieter and far more real. This journey follows an arc validation of your pain and then a complete flip of the frame. We'll name the shadow, call back your dignity, and crystallize meaning from what feels like chaos. No sugarcoating, no emotional pandering, just the truth delivered sharply enough to cut through the noise. Because here's what nobody tells you: the path to psychological rebirth doesn't begin with motivation or positive thinking. It begins with the courage to let the false thing die. So if you're exhausted, if you're questioning everything, if the person you see in the mirror feels like a stranger wearing your face, you're not broken. You're filtering. And what you're filtering out is everything that was never truly yours to begin with. Let's begin. You don't need more motivation. You need to cut power to what has expired. Burnout has become such a sanitized word. We talk about it like it's a temporary resource depletion, something a vacation or a wellness retreat can fix. Take a break, recharge your batteries, get back in the game. But what if your burnout isn't about empty batteries? What if it's your body's way of saying, "I will not participate in this anymore"? Think about it. You used to be able to push through. You used to find energy for things that now make you want to crawl under the covers. The morning routine that once felt purposeful now feels like putting on a costume. The career path that once excited you now induces a low-grade nausea. The social events you used to enjoy now drain you before they even begin. This isn't weakness. This is your nervous system withdrawing troops from territory occupied by roles that no longer serve you. In the framework of analytical psychology, what we call burnout is often the first stage of a much deeper transformation. Your psyche is conducting an internal audit, and it's discovering that massive amounts of your life force are being diverted to maintain a version of yourself that isn't actually you. The persona, that carefully constructed social mask you've been wearing, requires tremendous energy to maintain. And when the gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be becomes too wide, your body simply refuses to pay the tax anymore. The image here is simple, but precise: tight shoes. What fits someone else perfectly might cripple you. You can force your feet into those shoes. You can walk in them, even run in them for a while. But eventually, the pain becomes unbearable. Eventually, you have to stop, sit down, and admit these shoes were never made for me. Your exhaustion, your irritation, your sudden allergy to hustle culture and grinding and pushing through, these aren't character flaws. They're your psyche's emergency brake. The part of you that knows the truth is staging an intervention, and it's using your body as the venue. This is what makes the magnetic pull so disorienting. You feel pulled towards something you can't name and simultaneously repelled by everything that used to define you. It's not that you've lost your drive. It's that your drive has changed direction and you're still trying to steer toward the old destination. People will tell you to push harder, to remember your why, to think about how far you've come. They'll offer productivity hacks and morning routines and accountability partners. But here's what they don't understand. You're not suffering from a lack of discipline. You're suffering from a surplus of inauthenticity. The roles you've been playing, the good employee, the supportive friend, the responsible adult, the person who has it all together, these roles were useful once. They helped you navigate the world, build a life, earn approval and belonging. But roles have a shelf life. And when that shelf life expires, trying to keep them fresh is like trying to motivate a corpse to dance. You don't need a better planner. You don't need to optimize your calendar or your supplement stack or your meditation practice. You need to cut power to the thing that has died. You need to stop feeding energy to the expired version of yourself and let the withdrawal happen. This is terrifying, of course. Because who are you without these roles? What happens when you stop being the person everyone expects you to be? What's left when the performance ends? That's exactly the question your soul is asking you to answer. And it won't let you rest until you do. Here's what makes this phase so difficult. The people around you are still invested in the old version. They built their understanding of you around those roles. Your family expects you to be the reliable one. Your colleagues expect you to be the ambitious one. Your friends expect you to be the fun one. And when you start to deviate from those scripts, when you can't summon the energy to play those parts anymore, they experience it as betrayal. But it's not betrayal, it's evolution. And evolution doesn't ask permission from the ecosystem, it's disrupting. Your nervous system has done the math and determined that maintaining the performance costs more than your resources can sustain. So it's pulling the plug systematically, mercilessly, until you have no choice but to stop. Before we go deeper into this journey, I want to invite you to engage with this message. If what you're hearing resonates with something deep in your soul, if you feel seen in these words, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps this content reach other people who are walking through their own silent collapse, who need to know they're not alone in this transformation. Let's build a community of people courageous enough to let the false thing die. Now let's move into the awakening, where the real signs begin to show themselves. Your body is not betraying you. It is betraying what has expired. Sign 1. You can't tolerate the old normal anymore. It starts subtly. You're sitting in a meeting that 6 months ago you would have found engaging. Now you're watching people's mouths move and feeling absolutely nothing. Or worse, you're feeling a kind of low-grade revulsion, like you're watching a play you've seen too many times and can no longer pretend is profound. Your morning routine coffee news emails, the same loop you've run for years, suddenly feels like you're performing rituals in a dead religion. The weekend plans, the happy hours, the carefully curated Instagram feed, it all feels hollow. Not just boring, hollow. Like you're living in a movie set where nothing is quite real. This is one of the clearest signs your soul is awakening. You can't tolerate the old normal anymore because your psyche has outgrown it. The persona, that social contract you made with the world about who you would be, has completed its function. And now the self, that deeper organizing principle of your being, is pulling the plug. People will misinterpret this. They'll say you're depressed, ungrateful, going through a phase. They'll remind you of all the things you should be thankful for. And they're not wrong about the facts. Your life probably looks fine from the outside. It might even look enviable. But here's the thing about spiritual evolution. It doesn't care about your resume. In the language of Carl Jung's transformation, the persona is the face we show the world necessary for social survival, but ultimately a construction. When individuation begins, the self starts reclaiming the energy you've invested in maintaining that construction. It needs that energy for the real work ahead. So it makes the persona uncomfortable to inhabit. It creates friction fatigue, a sense of wrongness that you can't quite articulate. This is why you feel tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. You're not just physically tired. You're tired of the performance. Tired of monitoring your words, curating your image, playing your part. The fatigue is your psyche's way of saying the first "no more" has been spoken. A new covenant with truth is forming, whether you're ready or not. The question isn't whether you can get back to normal. You can't. That normal has become psychologically impossible. The question is whether you have the courage to acknowledge that and discover what comes next. Sign 2. The shadow rises. Right around the time your tolerance for the old normal collapses, something else happens. Emotions you thought you dealt with start bubbling up. Anger you haven't felt since adolescence. Jealousy that embarrasses you. Grief from childhood that you were sure you'd processed. Resentment toward people you love. Shame about things you thought you'd forgiven yourself for. This is not regression. This is not self-sabotage. This is the shadow rising. In analytical psychology, the shadow represents everything you've disowned about yourself, of the impulses, desires, weaknesses, and truths that didn't fit the persona you needed to build. Every time you said, "I'm not that kind of person," or "I'm above that," you were creating shadow material. Every time you chose to be appropriate over authentic, you fed the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's just unconscious. It's the raw data your psyche filed away because you weren't in a position to integrate it. But here's the critical insight. You don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light. You become enlightened by making the darkness conscious. The shadow rises during transformation because it contains the assets that were seized. Think about that for a moment. All that anger you buried because good people don't get angry, that's life force. That jealousy you're ashamed of, it's showing you what you actually want. That grief from 20 years ago, it's showing you what you actually valued and lost. This is why shadow work signs often include emotional volatility. You might find yourself crying at commercials, snapping at loved ones, or experiencing waves of inexplicable rage while doing something mundane like washing dishes. Your partner might ask, "Where is this coming from?" And you genuinely don't know. It's coming from the shadow. It's coming from the parts of you that have been waiting sometimes for decades to be acknowledged. And now that the persona is weakening, now that your psyche is restructuring, these parts are demanding their due. The instinct is to push them back down, to apologize for them, to white-knuckle your way back to being the composed person you were. But that's the exact opposite of what needs to happen. The shadow isn't rising to destroy you. It's rising to itemize what was taken, to show you where your authenticity was sacrificed, to return energy to the center so you can rebuild on truth instead of performance. This doesn't mean you act out every impulse or dump your emotional chaos on other people. Shadow work isn't about indulgence. It's about integration. It's about sitting with these uncomfortable emotions long enough to understand what they're trying to tell you. It's about asking, what part of my authentic self did I bury when I buried this feeling? The Carl Jung shadow isn't a monster. It's a messenger. And right now, it's delivering years of unread mail. Sign 3. A sudden need for solitude. At the same time the shadow rises, something else happens. You crave solitude in a way you maybe never have before. Not the solitude of loneliness, but the solitude of necessary withdrawal. You want to be alone, not because you're depressed, but because noise, any noise, feels toxic. Conversations that used to energize you now deplete you within minutes. Social gatherings feel like wearing wet clothes. Even the people you love, people you'd normally want around, start to feel like they're asking you to be someone you're not anymore. And you find yourself thinking, I just need everyone to leave me alone for a while. This terrifies people. They worry you're isolating, shutting down, giving up. They send concerned texts. Are you okay? You've been distant. And you struggle to explain that you're not distant. You're undergoing a psychological repolarization, and you need to step out of the crowd to hear the deep bass line. In the framework of psychological rebirth, solitude serves a specific function. It's the psyche's operating room. When a surgeon operates, they don't bring an audience into the surgical suite. The procedure requires sterility-focused silence. The same is true for deep psychological work. You can't reconstruct your inner architecture while performing for others. You can't hear the quiet voice of the self when you're surrounded by people who knew you as the persona. Think about it this way: for years you've been tuning yourself to external frequencies. You've been listening to what others think you should do, who they think you should be, what they expect from you. You've calibrated your life to fit into existing systems, family expectations, cultural norms, professional standards. And all that external calibration has drowned out your baseline frequency. Solitude is where you relearn your own frequency. It's where you sit in silence long enough for the performance to drop away. Long enough for the real questions to surface. Long enough to hear what your soul actually wants, divorced from what you think you should want. This is why solitude feels both urgent and uncomfortable. Urgent because your psyche knows it needs this surgery. Uncomfortable because when you're alone with yourself, really alone, you can't hide from what's true. There's no one to perform for, no one to distract you. Just you and the truth of where you actually are. Here's the confrontation. If you can't stand 20 minutes with yourself in silence, don't expect to withstand a truthful life. A truthful life requires you to know who you are when no one's watching. It requires a relationship with your own consciousness that isn't mediated by external validation. So when the need for solitude hits, and it will hit like a wave, don't pathologize it. Don't force yourself back into social performance because you're afraid of being seen as antisocial or depressed. Honor the withdrawal. Create the surgical room. Let the silence do its work. Because on the other side of this withdrawal, you'll emerge with something precious: the ability to distinguish between your voice and the chorus of voices you've been carrying around in your head. And that distinction is the foundation of everything that comes next. The greatest and most important problems of life are fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. We need to talk about structure. Not the structure of your calendar or your career, but the structure of your psyche. Because what's happening to you right now isn't random chaos. It's a very specific dismantling, and understanding the architecture being dismantled will change how you experience this transformation. In Jungian thought, the psyche operates on multiple levels. At the surface, you have the ego, the conscious I, that thinks it's running the show. The ego is essentially your PR department. It manages your public image, makes executive decisions, and maintains the story you tell about who you are. Beneath the ego is the persona, the social masks you wear to interface with different contexts. You have a work persona, a family persona, a friend group persona. These aren't fake exactly. They're adaptations, necessary for social survival. But beneath all of that, deeper than the ego's reach and the persona's performance, is the self. The self is the real edifice. It's the organizing principle of your entire being, the pattern of who you actually are, beneath all the roles and stories. The self doesn't care about your LinkedIn profile or your reputation or what people think. It cares about wholeness, truth, integration. And here's the critical point, and the self is not controlled by the ego. The ego doesn't command it. It doesn't even fully understand it. The relationship is reversed. The self is the foundation and the ego is the inhabitant. When individuation begins, the self starts restructuring the house, and the ego, used to thinking it owns the place, experiences this as a crisis. This is what's happening when your old achievements start to feel empty, when titles lose meaning, when the things you've built your identity around suddenly seem irrelevant. It's not depression. It's not a lack of gratitude. It's the self-reclaiming power from the ego's constructions. Let's go deeper into the signs of this transformation. Sign 4. Old achievements and titles lose meaning. You got the promotion. You hit the milestone. You earned the degree, the title, the recognition you've been working toward for years. And you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel hollow. Like you've won a game you no longer want to play. This is one of the most disorienting experiences in psychological rebirth. You look at your accomplishments, real measurable achievements that anyone would be proud of, and they feel like fossilized metals. Relics from a war that no longer makes sense. Trophies from someone else's life. People tell you to be grateful, to focus on what you've achieved, to remember how hard you worked to get here. And logically, they're right. But logic has nothing to do with what you're feeling. Because this isn't about the achievements themselves. It's about what they represented. Every achievement, every title, every role you've successfully occupied. These were expressions of the persona. They were your psyche's way of saying, look, I can do this. I can be valuable. I can earn belonging. And for a time, that was exactly what you needed. Those achievements gave you confidence, resources, social capital. They helped you build a life. But in the process of Carl Jung's transformation, individuation isn't about upgrading your roles. It's about dissolving them. It's about returning energy from the periphery, from all these external markers of success, back to the center, back to the self. This is why old achievements poison you when you hold on to them too long, because they've served their purpose and now they're trying to define you. They're trying to tell you who you are based on who you were. And the self is saying that chapter is finished. Those metals are fossils. Let them go. The ego resists this. Of course it does. The ego built its entire identity around those achievements. I am the person who accomplished X. I am the person who earned Y. I am the person who succeeded at Z. When those accomplishments lose their emotional weight, the ego feels like it's dying. And in a sense it is. Not the ego itself, but the ego's inflated sense of its own importance. This is where the frame flip happens. What feels like loss is actually liberation. What feels like emptiness is actually space. space for something truer, something that doesn't require constant external validation to feel real. Think about it. How much energy have you spent maintaining these titles, defending your position, proving your worth? Living up to the image these achievements created. That energy can be reclaimed, but only if you're willing to admit that the trophies have fermented. Only if you're willing to let your identity loosen from your resume. The question the self is asking you is this: if you weren't called anything, if you had no title, no role, no reputation, how would you choose to live? What would you create? What would matter? That question is terrifying because it strips away everything you've used to know yourself. But it's also the doorway to actual freedom. Because on the other side of that question is a life that doesn't require constant achievement to feel valuable. A life that isn't constantly trying to prove it deserves to exist. Sign 5. Intuition sharpens in the fog. Here's the paradox: at the exact moment when everything feels most confusing, when your old certainties have collapsed and you don't know who you are anymore, your intuition sharpens to a razor's edge. You'll be sitting with a decision, and suddenly you just know. Not because you've analyzed it or weighed the pros and cons. You just know. Deep in your gut, clear as a bell, there's a knowing that bypasses all rational thought. Or you'll have a dream so vivid, it feels more real than waking life. Or you'll keep seeing the same symbol, the same number, the same phrase showing up in unrelated contexts. Or someone will say something innocuous, and it will hit you like a revelation. Like the universe just answered a question you didn't know you were asking. This is the self communicating with the ego through the only language available: symbols, sensations, synchronicities. Because the self doesn't speak in words. It speaks in images, feelings, patterns. And during this transformation, when the rational mind is overwhelmed and the persona is weakening, the self's voice becomes audible. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. What looks like your life falling apart is actually your life reorganizing around a deeper pattern. The fog you're experiencing, the confusion, the not knowing, is necessary. It's the fertile void where the old structure dissolves and the new one begins to take shape. And in that void, stripped of your usual certainties, you become sensitive to signals you've been too busy to notice before. The key is learning to distinguish intuition from anxiety, because they can feel similar at first. Both are visceral. Both bypass rational thought. But there's a signature difference. Intuition is short, quiet, and decisive. It arrives as a complete knowing, often in an instant. It doesn't argue with you or explain itself. It just is. And once it delivers its message, it goes silent. Intuition is a one-time message. Read it or lose it. Anxiety, on the other hand, is long, loud, and recursive. It spins, it catastrophizes. It presents you with 100 scenarios and demands you prepare for all of them. It doesn't know, it worries, and it never shuts up. During this period of spiritual evolution, you'll get both. The trick is learning which voice is which, and the only way to learn is by experimenting. Follow the quiet knowing, see what happens, but ignore the loud spinning. See what happens. Over time, you'll develop discernment. Dreams become particularly important here. For those familiar with analytical psychology, dreams are the hotline from self to ego. They're how the unconscious sends intelligence to consciousness. And during transformation, the dream life typically becomes more vivid, more symbolic, more insistent. You don't need to become a dream interpretation expert. But you do need to pay attention. Keep a notebook by your bed. Write down what you remember, even if it's just fragments. Look for recurring images, emotions, themes. The unconscious is trying to show you something it can't tell you directly. Synchronicities work the same way. When you keep encountering the same idea in different contexts, a book, a conversation, a random article, that's not coincidence. That's your psyche saying, pay attention to this. This is relevant to what you're becoming. The ego wants explanations. It wants to understand, analyze, figure it out. But the self doesn't operate that way. The self operates through resonance, through felt sense, through symbolic knowing. And learning to trust that kind of knowing, even when it doesn't make logical sense, is part of what it means to individuate. This is where people often get stuck. They want transformation to make sense. They want it to be linear, explicable, controllable. But transformation is alchemical, not mechanical. It happens in the dark. It follows laws the conscious mind can't fully grasp. All you can do is pay attention to the signals and trust the process that's unfolding beneath your understanding. And here's something crucial: the sharpening of intuition during chaos isn't random. It's strategic. Your psyche knows that the old maps don't work anymore. The rules you've been following, the logic you've been applying, these got you to where you are, but they can't take you where you need to go. So the psyche activates a different navigation system, one that operates through felt sense, through symbolic resonance, through a kind of knowing that precedes thought. This is why indigenous cultures, mystical traditions, and depth psychology all emphasize the importance of dreams, visions, and intuitive knowing during rites of passage. Because when you're between worlds, no longer who you were, not yet who you're becoming, you need a different kind of intelligence to guide you. The rational mind is useful for maintenance, but it's useless for metamorphosis. Sign 6. Connections that don't align fall away. Around the same time your intuition sharpens, something else happens that can feel brutal. Relationships start to fall away. Not all of them. But certain friendships that once felt essential suddenly feel optional. Conversations that used to be enjoyable now feel performative. People you've known for years start to feel like strangers. This isn't about judgment or superiority. It's not that you've become better than them or they're holding you back. It's about frequency. As the self increases voltage during this transformation, your relational ecosystem reconfigures inevitably. Think of it as a measurement system. The people in your life were calibrated to a certain frequency, the frequency of your persona, the frequency of who you were before this transformation began. They got used to that version of you. They liked that version. They built their relationship with you around that version. But now you're changing frequency, not by choice, but by necessity. The transformation doesn't ask your permission. And when your frequency shifts, some connections naturally fall out of range. Not because anyone did anything wrong, just because the resonance is no longer there. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. That's the test. Real connection transforms both people. But when you're in deep transformation and the other person isn't, the chemistry changes. You're asking different questions now. You value different things, you're interested in different conversations. And the people who were drawn to your persona, to the role you played, the image you projected, don't know what to do with this rawer, more uncertain version of you. They might express concern. They might say you've changed, and not in a good way. They might pressure you to get back to yourself, by which they mean get back to the person I'm comfortable with. This is painful, especially when it happens with people you love. But here's the reframe: boundaries don't kill love. The lack of boundaries does. When you stay in relationships that require you to perform a version of yourself that no longer exists, you breed resentment. You create distance through proximity. You're together, but not really present. Letting certain connections fall away isn't coldness, it's honesty. It's making space for relationships that can meet you where you actually are, not where you used to be. Some friendships will survive this transition, but they'll have to be renegotiated. The person will have to be willing to know the new you, not just the familiar you. They'll have to be okay with uncertainty, with not having you figured out, with you not playing your usual role. And some friendships won't survive. They'll fade sometimes with a definitive conversation, sometimes just through mutual drift. And that's okay. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some people are in your life for a season, and that season ending doesn't negate what you shared. It just acknowledges that you're in different chapters now. The hard truth is this: true friendship doesn't hire you to replay your old version so they feel safe. True friendship makes space for transformation, even when that transformation is uncomfortable to witness. During this period, you might find yourself gravitating toward completely different kinds of people. People who are also in transition. People who aren't afraid of depth or silence. People who can be with you without needing you to be anyone in particular. These connections might feel newer, less certain, but they'll resonate at your current frequency. This is the ecosystem reorganizing. Old connections fall away. New ones emerge. And in the middle, there's often a period of solitude, a relational desert, where you're not quite connected to the old world anymore, and not yet connected to the new one. That desert is necessary. It's where you learn to be complete in yourself without using relationships to avoid your own company. We don't command the self. We make way for it. If you're still with me at this point in the journey, you've walked through the collapse, the awakening, the depths. You felt your tolerance for the old normal shatter. You've watched the shadow rise and demand acknowledgement. You've experienced the pull toward solitude, the hollowing out of old achievements, the sharpening of intuition, and the reconfiguration of your relational world. And now you're in what might be the most challenging part, the integration. The space between the death of who you were and the birth of who you're becoming. The alchemical fire where nothing is certain, but everything is transforming. This is where we need to talk about directed pain versus aimless chaos. Sign 7. Small sparks appear. After what feels like endless dissolution months or even years of everything breaking down, you start to notice something subtle. A small spark of clean curiosity. A moment where your baseline feels calm, not numb. An aesthetic shift, you're drawn to different music, different art, different environments than before. These aren't dramatic revelations. They're not fireworks. They're quiet recalibrations, like the first green shoots after a forest fire. Fragile, tentative, but undeniably alive. You might find yourself interested in something you've never cared about before, or returning to something you loved as a child before you learned what you were supposed to love. You might redecorate your space and realize you're choosing colors you've never chosen before. You might read a book or watch a film that 6 months ago would have meant nothing to you, and now it feels like it was written for exactly where you are. These are the signs of spiritual evolution, not the dramatic kind, the cellular kind. Your entire system is retuning itself to a new frequency, and these small sparks are the evidence. In alchemical terms, this is the movement from nigredo to albedo to rubedo. The nigredo, the blackening, is the dissolution we've been talking about. Everything breaking down, the shadow rising, the old structures collapsing. It's the necessary death that precedes transformation. The albedo, the whitening, is the purification that follows. It's the washing clean of old attachments, old identities. It's the space between selves where you're not quite anyone yet, where you're learning to be present without a fully formed identity to anchor you. And the rubedo, the reddening, is the return of vitality. Not the frantic borrowed energy of the persona, but the warm, grounded energy of someone coming back into alignment with their actual self. This is where the small sparks live, in the rubedo, in the slow return to a baseline that's authentically yours. Rebirth doesn't come with fireworks. It resets the baseline frequency. And that resetting feels like relief, like you can finally breathe all the way down. Like the constant background static that's been running in your mind for years has gone quiet. You're not suddenly confident or certain or transformed into some idealized version of yourself. You're just more real, more present, more okay with not knowing, more at home in your own skin, even if that skin feels different now. This is the phase where people around you might start to comment, "You seem different. You seem calmer. You seem more yourself." And you'll struggle to explain what changed, because nothing external changed. You didn't get a new job, or move to a new city, or meet someone who fixed you. The change happened internally. The frequency shifted. The self found its proper axis. Here's the crucial distinction that determines whether this transformation leads to integration or just more suffering, the presence of witness consciousness. Directed pain has an inner witness. Even in the darkest moments, there's a part of you that can observe what's happening, that can hold language for it, even if the language is just, "This is the dissolution phase. This is necessary. I'm not lost. I'm filtering." Directed pain has symbolic connection. You can see how what's happening fits into a larger pattern. You can recognize archetypal themes, the death and rebirth, the descent into the underworld, the dark night of the soul. You're not alone in this experience. You're walking a path that humans have walked for millennia. Directed pain trusts the process. Not blindly, but with a kind of mature faith that something is trying to happen here. That the psyche knows what it's doing even when the ego is completely lost. Aimless chaos, on the other hand, has no witness. There's no observing consciousness, just pure identification with the pain. You are the chaos. There's no space between you and it. Aimless chaos has no symbolic framework. It's just random suffering with no meaning, no pattern, no purpose. It's pain that leads nowhere and teaches nothing. Aimless chaos resists the process, fights it, tries to think its way out or numb its way through or force its way back to normal. The difference between these two experiences isn't the intensity of pain. It's the relationship to the pain. And developing that witnessing capacity, that ability to be in pain without being consumed by it, is one of the most important skills you can cultivate during transformation. This is where practices like journaling therapy, contemplation, or working with depth-oriented modalities become critical. Not because they make the pain go away, but because they help you develop the witness. They help you hold language and meaning for what's happening, so it doesn't just feel like drowning. The philosophical conclusion here is profound. You don't control the self. You can't force transformation or speed it up or make it conform to your timeline. What you can do is cooperate with it. You can make space for it. You can stop fighting the dissolution and start trusting that something is trying to be born. This isn't self-control, it's self-accord. It's bringing your will into alignment with a process that's already underway. It's saying, "I don't understand this, but I'm going to stop resisting it. I'm going to let the tight shoes come off, even though I don't know what I'll walk in next. I'm going to enter the surgical room of solitude, even though I'm afraid of what I'll find there. I'm going to let the fossilized metals fall, even though I built my identity around them." This is the junction of empathy and confrontation. I see you. I see how painful this is. I see how disorienting and lonely and scary this transformation feels. You're not broken. The old structures simply can't bear your new height. That's not a failure. That's physics. But I'm also going to ask you a hard question. If you're still exhausted from propping up the role who's living the real life you, or the mask, how much longer are you willing to perform for an audience that doesn't actually see you? How much more energy are you willing to waste maintaining an identity that expired months or years ago? The mask is tired. Let it rest. What's underneath it is tired too, but it's tired from hiding. Let it emerge. Let it be awkward and uncertain and not quite formed yet. Let it be real. Because here's what nobody tells you about psychological rebirth. It doesn't produce a finished product. It produces a living process. You don't arrive at some final perfected version of yourself. You arrive at a relationship with yourself that's honest, dynamic, evolving. You arrive at the ability to keep transforming without it destroying you. The goal isn't to become someone. The goal is to stop preventing yourself from being who you already are, beneath all the layers of protection and performance. You're not lost. You're filtering. We've traveled through 50 minutes together, and if you're still here, something in you recognized this journey. Not because I told you anything you didn't already know, but because I named something you've been feeling but couldn't articulate. Let's bring it all together. You started with a collapse, an exhaustion that no amount of rest could cure, a nervous system in revolt against inauthenticity. And instead of pathologizing it, we named it for what it is, the boot sequence of individuation. The body withdrawing troops from occupied territory, the self staging an intervention. You moved through the awakening, the moment when you couldn't tolerate the old normal anymore because your psyche had outgrown it, when the shadow rose to itemize the assets that were seized not as self-sabotage but as necessary recovery, when solitude became urgent because you needed the psyche's operating room, the space to hear your baseline frequency beneath the noise. You descended into the depths, where old achievements became fossilized metals, where titles lost meaning not because you failed, but because the self was reclaiming power from the ego's constructions. Where intuition sharpened in the fog because the self speaks in symbols when the rational mind is overwhelmed. Where relationships fell away not from coldness, but from frequency change, the natural reconfiguration that happens when transformation increases your voltage. And you entered integration, where small sparks appeared not as fireworks, but as quiet recalibrations. Where directed pain witnessed, symbolized, trusted, became the path to rebirth. Where you learned that you don't command the self, you make way for it. This is the arc of transformation. Collapse, confrontation, clarity, reconstruction. And none of it happens on your timeline. None of it happens according to plan. It happens in the dark, following laws the ego can't control, reshaping you into someone you don't yet recognize, but will eventually remember. So what now? What do you do with this knowledge? First, understand that you're not alone in this. What you're experiencing is one of the oldest human processes. Every myth, every spiritual tradition, every depth psychology framework points to the same pattern: death and rebirth, dissolution and integration, the dark night of the soul and the return to light. Your ancestors walked this path. The people you admire who seem genuinely alive, they walked this path. Everyone who has ever individuated, who has ever become real instead of just acceptable, has gone through some version of what you're going through now. Second, trust the process, even when it makes no sense. The ego wants to understand, control, predict. But transformation is alchemical. It happens beneath conscious awareness, following a wisdom older than your rational mind. Your job isn't to figure it out. Your job is to cooperate with it. Third, develop your witness. Find ways to observe what's happening without being consumed by it. Journal. Talk to someone who understands depth work. Create symbolic containers for the experience: art, music, movement, ritual. Anything that helps you hold language and meaning for the chaos. Fourth, let things fall away. The relationships that can't meet you at your new frequency. The achievements that feel like fossils. The roles that expired. The parts of your life that require constant performance to maintain. Let them go. Not with aggression or drama, but with quiet honesty: this isn't mine anymore. Fifth, pay attention to the sparks, the small moments of genuine interest, the aesthetic shifts, the dreams, the synchronicities, the quiet knowings that bypass logic. These are messages from the self-breadcrumbs leading you toward your actual life. And finally, be patient with yourself. Transformation doesn't happen in a weekend workshop or a 30-day challenge. It happens in seasons, in cycles, in waves. You'll have moments of clarity followed by moments of total confusion, periods of energy followed by periods of deep fatigue, times when you feel solid followed by times when you feel like you're dissolving again. That's normal. That's the process. You're not failing. You're not doing it wrong. You're just in it, and being in it is the work. The culture wants to sell you quick fixes and instant transformations. 3 steps to your best self. 5 habits of highly evolved people. But real psychological rebirth doesn't work that way. It's not a transaction. It's not a program. It's an organic unfolding that has its own timeline, its own rhythm, its own wisdom. Think about how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Inside the cocoon, the caterpillar doesn't just grow wings and fly away. It literally dissolves. Its entire structure breaks down into a kind of primordial soup before reorganizing into something new. If you cut open the cocoon during that dissolution phase, you wouldn't find a butterfly in progress. You'd find chaos. But that chaos is necessary. That chaos is the transformation. You're in the cocoon right now. And it feels like dissolution because it is dissolution. The old form is breaking down, and the new form hasn't stabilized yet. This in-between state, this liminal space, is where all real transformation happens. It's uncomfortable, it's uncertain, but it's not wrong. When the self enters the room, the ego knows to be quiet. Not because it's weak, but because it finally recognizes the real authority. And that recognition, that moment when you stop trying to control your transformation and start serving it, is when everything changes. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, no rebirth without death, no authenticity without the courage to let inauthenticity fall away. But here's the promise. On the other side of this transformation, you don't arrive at some perfect pain-free existence. You arrive at a life that's actually yours, a baseline frequency that doesn't require constant maintenance, a sense of self that isn't dependent on external validation, the ability to be present to your own experience without constant commentary or performance. You arrive at the capacity to live from the inside out instead of the outside in. And that is worth every moment of the dissolution you're walking through right now. So here's my final question for you, the one to carry with you as you continue this journey. If you didn't need to be called anything, if you had no title, no role, no reputation to uphold, how would you choose to live? Sit with that. Let it haunt you. Let it guide you. Because the answer to that question is the life that's trying to be born through you. And everything you're experiencing right now, the collapse, the pain, the confusion, the sparks, is in service of that birth. You're not broken. You're becoming. You're not lost. You're filtering. And what you're filtering out is everything that was never truly yours to begin with. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If this resonated with you, I invite you to share it with someone who might need to hear it, to leave a comment about your own experience of transformation, to subscribe so we can continue exploring the depths together. Because this work, the work of becoming real, is the most important work there is. And we need communities of people courageous enough to do it. Until next time, trust the process, honor the pain, make space for what's emerging. Your transformation is not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. And it's only just beginning.